So the brief and the simple is disconnect the battery, take off your pulley, which they'll show you in a bunch of videos on J-Bugs and everybody else, but if I could find it, there's a little spot on the pulley right there where you can get a screwdriver in. You just roll it around to the top, put your screwdriver in there. For me, it's a 19. For most of you, it's a 19. Put a 19 millimeter wrench on there, break that loose, and pull your pulley off as well as your belt, because they're going to need to get out of the way. Most people have a generator that has gone bad because this pulley has gone bad. I wasn't real sure on mine because when I finally got it off, this pulley, the interior piece of this pulley was trashed, as well as the fitting for the fan on the backside of it. So it could have been either of them that destroyed mine. So, like I said, let's get back to it. You take off that pulley and the belt, get them out of the way. Then you're going to start working to get that out. For mine, you'd have getting the air cleaner out of there is a kind of a must because I have, or the air cleaner, the oil breather out of there because it's large. It just provides room. If you have the stock one, a lot of the times they have a breather tube, solid metal tube running down that drops out of the bottom of the engine. So it makes it a little bit of a pain in the butt, but MP also has a tool to get that breather off, to get the oil fill cap off. It's a weird little tool that I don't have sitting right in front of me, but I have one, and it takes a little bit just to get it to break loose. I would suggest putting some PB Blaster on it. Mine didn't want to break loose, and after a day of sitting with PB Blaster, it finally broke loose, just like every other bolt on this car. So you'll take that out of the way. Then you're going to take off your air cleaner, which mine's pretty easy to take off. It's that, and then 4 10mm bolts. I actually pulled out the top half of the distributor to get the cap out of the way, just to give me a little extra room to move around. And on mine, I have a 3236 clone. I had an original 3236 that actually went bad. The pain in the butt on this is there it is, the little mounting screw that connects your fuel line right there. When you go back in, mine's going to look different than yours is going to look if you have one of these. Normally, you're mounted on the middle hole, and because I ended up having to put riser plates in, I needed more room, so I had to go to the back hole itself, which is good that it's there. Otherwise, I would have had to cut one in. But it works perfectly fine. It was no adjustment, no nothing. I put it in the middle one first, and it was revving at like 4,500 RPMs or something, like you were pushing on the gas, and then put it in the back one, and it idles and revs perfectly normal. So nothing too bad. So the brief and the simple is disconnect the battery, take off your pulley, which they'll show you in a bunch of videos on J-Bugs and everybody else. But if I could find it, there's a little spot on the pulley right there where you can get a screwdriver in. You just roll it around to the top, put your screwdriver in there. For me, it's a 19. For most of you, it's a 19. Put a 19 millimeter wrench on there, break that loose, and pull your pulley off as well as your belt, because they're going to need to get out of the way. Most people have a generator that has gone bad because this pulley has gone bad. I wasn't real sure on mine because when I finally got it off, this pulley, the interior piece of this pulley was trashed, as well as the fitting for the fan on the backside of it. So it could have been either of them that destroyed mine. So, like I said, let's get back to it. You take off that pulley and the belt, get them out of the way. Then you're going to start working to get that out. For mine, you'd have getting the air cleaner out of there is a kind of a must because I have, or the air cleaner, the oil breather out of there because it's large. It just provides room. If you have the stock one, a lot of the times they have a breather tube, solid metal tube running down that drops out of the bottom of the engine. So it makes it a little bit of a pain in the butt, but MP also has a tool to get that breather off, to get the oil fill cap off. It's a weird little tool that I don't have sitting right in front of me, but I have one, and it takes a little bit just to get it to break loose. I would suggest putting some PB Blaster on it. Mine didn't want to break loose, and after a day of sitting with PB Blaster, it finally broke loose, just like every other bolt on this car. So you'll take that out of the way. Then you're going to take off your air cleaner, which mine's pretty easy to take off. It's that, and then 4 10mm bolts. I actually pulled out the top half of the distributor to get the cap out of the way, just to give me a little extra room to move around. And on mine, I have a 3236 clone. I had an original 3236 that actually went bad. The pain in the butt on this is there it is, the little mounting screw that connects your fuel line right there. when you go back in, mine's going to look different than yours is going to look if you have one of these. Normally, you're mounted on the middle hole, and because I ended up having to put riser plates in, I needed more room, so I had to go to the back hole itself, which is good that it's there. Otherwise, I would have had to cut one in. But it works perfectly fine. It was no adjustment, no nothing. I put it in the middle one first, and it was revving at like 4,500 RPMs or something, like you were pushing on the gas, and then put it in the back one, and it idles and revs perfectly normal. So nothing too bad. So taking off my carb is not actually all that hard. They're 13mm bolts. There's one, two, there's a third one back in there, but you can actually, when your air filter's off, you can come down straight to it with a 13. And then way on the back side over here, there's a pain in the butt one. I'm gonna try to get the camera to, can I get it? I can probably get it, but I can't get it focused. But it's back down on the back side there. But you can also, with a wobble, you can also get back to that 13mm pretty easy. And all you have to do is break the bolt loose because they're on studs. And once they're broken loose, you can finger loosen them right off, just like everything else in this motor. Once it's broken loose, you're generally good to go. So take your carb off. Then you're going to get to the hard part. So in order to get the alternator generator off, you have to be able to lift the fan shroud about an inch. Otherwise, the fan has no clearance to come out. And you need about an inch in height to get clearance for that to come out. So there's two bolts, which on J-Bugs they talk about. I'm going to try to get you a view of each of them. So there's the first one right there. That's on the right-hand side. If you're looking at the motor, it's on the passenger side. You'll see your intakes right there, just so you can see it. Whoops, it just blurred out on me because of my hand. But that is the one, and the other one is a lot harder, so I'm going to try to get something to point at that because it's going to be hard to see. So if you get down on this one, I'm just trying to get a view of it right. You'll be able to see it on your motor, but right down in there, there is another bolt that's very hard to get to. Let me see if I can get the camera to find it in there. And it should be, get it some light right down in there. I know it's hard to see. So the easiest way to get to it is to come at it from the back side of the motor itself. So you want to go underneath your breather tube, and you see your intake right there. And I'm gonna see if I can spot it. It's hard to get the camera to work with me, but right in there you can get a wrench. You won't be able to fit much of a wrench. There we go. Let's see if we can't get it to refocus a little. You won't be able to get much of a wrench back in there. Your normal 10mm isn't gonna make it, but as you see up here, I got an extended 10mm. So this is a double end, so it's an 8 and a 10. And it's what, 9 inches long, 9.5 inches long, something like that, which you can see is longer than your standard box or combo wrench. So you go down here, and you're not going to be able to see it, but you take your 10 and you go back on it and start low, and just all you've got to do is break it. So you need not even probably a 1/10 of a turn to break that one loose. And you may want to PB blaster it the night before just to make it easier. And it's a pain in the butt. If you have to, you can always, with your right hand, get the wrench on, and with your left hand, come down through the top of the motor behind, so you can hold the wrench on it so it doesn't slip. That's what I found to be a real pain in the butt, was getting that wrench back there and then getting it so it wouldn't slip, and I could get it on, hold it on, and break it loose. One of the big things that I ended up doing that J-Bugs doesn't like you to do, or I shouldn't say doesn't like you to do, but they talk about you don't have to do it, is taking off the engine cover, which is really easy. So since I have it here, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts, and then a spring that you just squeeze the spring clip in. It's basically a massive spring clip. I'm gonna get some light on it, there we go. So you just squeeze on these two inside, and it just slides itself right out. As you can see, they pin up right there. So you squeeze them and they come out of their little holes. It took me about 2 minutes to take right off, and it took me about 3 minutes to put back on. When you put it back on, do it in the same order you took it off. So, well, actually I should change it. I did the spring clip and then took these off when I removed it, And when I put it back on, I put the brackets back on first, and then I didn't have an assistant at that point, so I held it up with my head and put the spring clip back in. So, but it actually was pretty easy. And you can see right where your bolt's mounted usually, because they're old and dirty and haven't been taken off in 20 years. So it's not usually a problem to see where they go. Back to where we were. Once you break that left-hand bolt, the driver's side bolt free, man, I feel like I'm so close to actually getting some light on it. And you all seen, but it's not happening. Once you break that one free, go over and break the right one free. You know, I mean, you can do them whatever order. The left-hand driver's side one is just the hardest nightmare one to get to. It took me the longest. Once those are free, you can actually, it helps to have an assistant, that's for sure, just to lift it up. But you can lift the fan shroud like an inch or so. I forgot to tell you. They say it on the J-Bugs one. Take off your strap also once your carburetor's out of the way. That way you can get to the strap, take it off, get it out of the way so it's not held to the stand. So you lift your fan shroud. There's 4 bolts on the backing plate that are easy to get to. Again, I believe they're 10 millimeters. I use that same long wrench just to break them free, and then they come free. You can take them out by hand without a problem. Lift up the fan shroud. Take out your actual alternator / generator, whatever you have in there that you're having a problem with or replacing. Go ahead, replace it. Like I said, on the back of mine, the fan itself, the mount was cracked and broken in 2 places. So that could have been causing the wobble. I have no idea, but you know, either way, it destroyed my generator. It was also probably a 71-year-old or a 51-year-old generator. So I replaced it with a higher amp alternator, which means that your regulator, your voltage regulator inside that I showed you where its location earlier, that's going to come out, and we'll look at that in just a second. So J-Bugs walks you through most of the other stuff you need to do. It's not too hard. The one trick that I needed was the actual stand. So there's 2 things with this stand, if you go, especially if you go with an upgrade, that it may not fit perfectly. The upgraded alternators are bigger, so their bells, this piece right here that holds the actual wiring, is not much larger, but it's larger, so it doesn't fit as well. So it needs a different stand. Let's go up to our stand up here. There is the same style stand, you know, all 4 bolts, just like you said. It has to slide onto a stud past the manifold, which is a pain in the butt, or the intake, the header. What I ended up doing, because I couldn't get it through, when I got the old one out, I basically had to use pressure up on the engine just to get me, you know, like a 1/16 of an inch to get it out. But these are slightly larger and I couldn't get it to go back in. So I ended up taking a hammer, and so it's going to go on your car in this direction. You're looking at it from this orientation, taking a hammer and hammering down the back left. And I didn't have to hammer it down much here. I'll turn it that way. Didn't have to hammer it down much. It just needed, like I said, maybe a 1/16 of an inch, maybe a 32nd of an inch. Pounding that down to thin out the metal, because it's not a real heavy metal, so that it could slide underneath that header, the intake. Otherwise, it wasn't going to go in. So it goes in. You get it on all 4 studs. J-Bug shows you the breather underneath it, the cover and the gasket, so don't worry about that. Go to J-Bugs for that. I'm just going through the tips and tricks. Getting that back bolt that I hammered down on is a pain in the butt. With the carburetor out, it's a little easy. I actually used, where is my magnet? I used a reachable magnet and just put the bolt on it, lowered it down, and barely screwed it into place just so it would hold. Then I could go through and finger tighten the whole thing, and after I finger tightened it, I went in from the top doing the same thing with, I think it was 2 wobbles, a 2.5 inch wobble and then a 4 inch wobble on it, and with obviously a 13 millimeter socket, and just slowly tighten that down. And they say to tighten it down in cross pattern so you don't strip anything out. So I started with that back one, came up front, then back right, then front left. So just to make it a little bit easier, that's the way to do it. As you can tell, my hammer bounced around and I hit things, and my stand fell because I didn't vise it. I just set it on my workbench and started hammering, but it'll survive. It works perfectly fine. Okay, so when it all goes back in, you're going to put it back in the reverse order. Your backing plate's going to get mounted, and then you're going to to the fan shroud itself, and just like on J-Bug, spin test it, make sure it's smooth and it's not grinding on anything. I didn't need to shim mine, but I could tell it was really easy for these cars to have that happen, so you might need to shim yours. Everything goes back in, so ground strap, or the generator strap goes back on. You know, I didn't rewire it, but I pulled all the wires through. When I went back to put my carburetor back on, it no longer fit. So right up here, it started interfering, and you can tell it's, whoops, there we go, it's right on the housing. I mean, there's not even a 32nd of an inch of space in there. So I ended up having to order 2 5.5 millimeter risers with gaskets to lift it above the bell housing for the generator, or for the alternator. And so in that lift, there's one riser, and that's a second riser, or the black part's the second riser with a heavier gasket on top just to seal. And it sealed fine, but the gaskets, having the 2 gaskets meant I didn't need to do a third riser. And it also gave them gasket seals on the top and the bottom, so that made a big difference. It runs great, it works perfect, but I had to work that out. I actually like these aluminum ones better, but that's just me. I think aluminum's better than that polycarbonate or whatever the hell that is. You know, that's a composite, which everybody seems to say works just fine, but to me, I like metal. So I probably, next time, if I did it again, I'd probably go with 2 metal risers instead of the composite and the metal. When you come around, like I said, when you rehook everything up, I had to hook my fuel line to the 3rd hole instead of the middle. It's the only thing that I did differently. You know, make sure you hook up all your vacuum line if you have one. Make sure you hook up your fuel lines, you know, all the normal stuff. Nothing too crazy about it. And I put it all back on. I actually had to tune the carburetor just a little bit. I don't know if that was due to adding riser plates, or I just knocked the screws around when setting it over next to my car for a week. Who knows? But so it took a little bit of tuning to the idle adjustment screw. Everything else was perfectly fine. So put your breather back on, you know, just like you normally would. Nothing too crazy. When you go back into the car, your voltage regulator is going to be, there's your, I'll give you again reference, there's your battery. Your voltage regulator mounts to those screw holes. One's got the ground going to it. You see the other empty screw hole over there on the right. So if you do a generator, like what comes with these Beetles, you're just going to leave it like it is. Unhook. I mean, you don't have to mess with your voltage regulator. I did an alternator upgrade, so the voltage regulator comes out. There's my voltage regulator. It comes out because the alternator is internally regulated, so you don't need 2 regulators. In fact, it doesn't work if you have 2 regulators. So I did buy these from J-Bugs. I like them, the 1/4 inch terminal connectors. So all 3 of your hots had to get cut and have a 1/4 inch terminal connector put on, a female 1/4 inch put on, and then they all connect to each other. Oops, let me get that back in focus. Then they all connect to each other, which is what that is. And then your blue and your green, also in the voltage. Green's on the left-hand side, blue's on the right-hand side. They both need female connectors, and they connect to each other. So that's what you're seeing right there. Normally, if I'm trying to remember right, you can go back and look at your wiring diagram, but let me set that down. Your green is here, your blue is there, hot, and then that 3rd hot is connected right down here on one. It's either that screw or this screw, one of the 2. So there's nothing too crazy about it, but you do need to take it out if you do an alternator upgrade. Those are, J-Bug sends you a pack of like 4 of each or something like that. So those are the little connectors that you need, or you have to connect them manually, which is a pain in the butt. For $2, I was perfectly fine with giving J-Bugs a little money and having connectors made for me. That should be about it. If I remember any other crazy things about this build, this replacement, not build, I will let you know. But, oh, okay, so when you're putting your bolts back on to your fan shroud, I'm going to try to show you on this side because you can see it better. On the passenger side, you can see it better. And let's see if we can get in there. So your fan shroud comes down right where that bolt mounts up. And you sort of have to fit it in. It slides into its mount, into its tin. Same thing on this side, but you're not going to be able to see it as clear. So I started with the driver's side, the left side that has the pain in the butt bolt, to get that one mounted in. And you get down low and you can also see the mount. You'll be able to see it when you're working on your car. It's hard to see. You may even want to take out this breather line just so that you can see better. It might make it a little easier. So when you go through and you put your fan shroud back in, I got the fan shroud in, and with the engine cover off, you can look straight down at where that bolt goes and see it a lot clearer. With the engine cover on, it's not as easy to see where the bolt is back there. So that's why it's the one reason I really do suggest taking the engine cover off, not just for moving the fan shroud around. So you get your fan shroud down and line up that bolt hole, and it's actually not hard to line it up, and then just get it finger started. That's all you got to do, is get a little bit of a start in there, and then it'll hold itself perfectly fine. Yeah, I did it almost completely tightened down with its washer. I dropped about 3 washers in the process and then started to get good at it and figure out what I was doing. So you'll probably end up doing something along those lines, and then move over to the right side of the engine, the passenger side, and do the same thing. But the right side, you can see right where it lines up. You can see the bolt hole. You have easy access to it. So like, I didn't have to pull off any wires or anything on either side. It's just hard to do the left side, driver's side, when you're doing it and not able to see, but you sort of get an idea of what you're doing, and you'll get better at it, and you'll eventually just get it right in. It'll be frustrating. Take a break, go cool off, come back and do it again. It's always easier when you clear your mind and come back. Other than that, there was nothing too crazy about it. Just make sure you hook up everything on top. Like I have an electric choke, so hook up your electric choke. Hook up your hot, hook up your ground, wherever. I can't see it back there, but right back there is your ground. And I think that's about it over there. And like I said, I took off my distributor cap. Be sure to put that back on in the right spot. Hook up your vacuum lines, make sure it's still in there. Otherwise your car's going to idle at, 3,000 RPMs when you first start it. So, but you'll figure it out. It's not too hard. Obviously put your pulley back on. Make sure you have a 1/2 inch of play. And shoot me some messages or questions in the comments area if you have any. And I'm also going to put a link to the long box wrench, the double-sided box wrench that I used, and to the parts that I got off J-Bugs and other places that I needed. All right, thanks. I almost forgot. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to all 4 of my videos.